Hello, I'm Pugs, and you're watching Identity Transracial Adoptee Experiences. This is part 2 of the conversation with Christina, a multiracial transracial adoptee. In part 1, Christina discussed being perceived as not American or not American enough, being perceived as Asian ethnicities other than her own. She discussed the intersection of racism and misogyny, of having to accept bias and prejudice in order to keep friends and to fit in. She discussed being raised in a colorblind family. And we left off there with the concept of family. If you haven't watched part 1, I highly recommend that you take a break from this video, go watch part 1, the link is in the description, and then come back and finish watching this video. In this video, part 2, we pick up where we left off with the concept of family and what family means to a transracial adoptee. We delve a little bit deeper into Christina's identity formation journey. We discuss growing up without racial mirrors or adoptee mirrors. And we discuss the ways that adoption trauma manifests itself in our lives. As always, I would love to read your comments down below about your own identity formation journey, your own transracial adoption story, whether you're an adoptee, a birth parent, or an adoptive parent. And I would love for you to leave a comment about any quotes or any moments that really spoke to you, maybe writing out the quote in the comment or leaving a timestamp of a moment that was particularly resonant for you. Again, I apologize for the technical issues that resulted in the video freezing and skipping, but it's the conversation, it's the audio that's most important. And so you can still watch or listen to the conversation, even though the video is a little bit wonky at times. Also, I'd like to apologize for the random sounds throughout the conversation. There's doors creaking, there's dogs barking, there's a motorcycle going past, there's water running, etc. This is one of the very first interviews that I recorded via video conference, and I had a lot to learn about minimizing noise. So that's enough from me. Let's dive into the interview. So what is your understanding of family? What does family mean to you?
Family, for me, is the people that were there for me. And then when I think about it like that, like provided me to the best of their ability with my needs. And as white parents, they've never experienced racial incidents, so they didn't have the ability to help me navigate that. But in other regards, they taught me a lot. They taught me things like to give without expecting anything in return. Like they are two of the most giving people that I have ever met. But family, I have 3 friends that I consider my sisters that are there. I talk to 3 women every single day. Usually more than once a day. Like on the way back, like in the car. And that's very important to me.
I've found in talking with other transracial adoptees that their concept of family tends to be a little bit more expansive than just the nuclear family, the bloodlines that most people take for granted. And I suppose with some non-transracial adoptees, or non-adoptees in general, because of the prevalence of divorce and remarriage and step siblings and et cetera, that it's becoming more common for people to have a wider view of what family is. But it's still mostly adoptees and transracial adoptees that I talk to who kind of define family for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? Instead of relying on specific relationships, like familial relationships, to define what a family is.
Right.
Like for me, my family is obviously my partner, my wife, and I have two best friends, and these and these two women are my family. You
Yep.
know, that is, for me, that is the core of my family, is my wife and my two best friends. And so being able to see past specific familial bounds
Yeah.
and familial relationships and create a sense of family
Mm-hmm.
is a trait that I've been finding more and more with adoptees than with non-adoptees. But
I think any positive influence for my kids, I am grateful for. I think different people have different meanings. So, like my friends that I consider sisters, they're my emotional support. And I can bounce things off of them, and they will listen. And I will say, I just had a really hard time with this. And that's who I can talk to. My adoptive family is there in a different way. Yeah, it's having needs met. And who's there. And I know who's there for me. It took me, but well into my 20s, that I really had a hard time trusting people, trusting that they would be there for me. Well into my 20s, because I still didn't feel heard. I still didn't feel my experience. And I think until a person does feel like they're validated, like they're heard, like their experience is their experience, how can you be confident?
yeah, and that trust issue is interesting because I think that's more common, especially within the transracial adoption community and transracial adoptees. I think it's actually a very common thing. I don't trust easily either. You know, that's one of the first things that my wife pointed out to me when we were dating and everything. She's like, you don't trust people, do you?" And I'm like, "No, I don't know that I really put words around it before, but I was like, you're right. No, I really don't."
I didn't want to have to depend on anyone.
Yes, that is absolutely core part of my identity, is the self-reliance.
Because being let down and expecting, like, depending on someone that's not there is more devastating. I feel like that really traumatizes. It brings up issues of abandonment. So like as a kid, I just would rather not. As a young adult, I just would rather not. I'd rather just do it. Although I was still completely dependent on people. So, like financially.
It's interesting, so that even though we are in various ways dependent on other people, we find other ways to feel self-reliant. I know that I told you in a previous conversation about when my mother would clean my room when I was little, that I shared with my older brother. She would find food that I'd stolen from the kitchen and hidden. And we're talking very little, like pre-verbal, like 3 years old for me.
Mm-hmm.
And she would find food that I'd hidden, and I've always, my entire life, had a plan for how I would escape if I needed to run away, and where I would go and what I would do. And I actually did run away several times when I was many times between like 11, 12 years old and 16ish, 14, 15, 16. I ran away a lot. But I always, having that, and I've been collecting skills my entire life, like outdoor skills and survival skills, so that if I did need to run away, I could take care of myself, and I could, So it's interesting that even though, yes, you're right, in a lot of ways we are still just as dependent on other people as a non-adoptee is, but we do find ways to still grasp onto that sense of self-reliance.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do. I think I bet you I do the same thing, and I always like to even definitely have the fear of being reliant on not just people, but like the government. Like I'm like I want wood heat, I want electric, I want I want every single time I type in case something happens. Money here and money here. I need different sources of electricity. It is very. I don't like to be reliant on one thing.
And a lot of that's just that trauma brain,
Yes.
because during our early formative development, when the very primitive parts of the brain are developing, I mean, we've had trauma imprinted there, and we've had lack of structure and lack of basic care imprinted in those places in the back of the brain.
Right. And needs not being met. Like,
Needs not being met. Exactly. You're exactly right.
yeah, and that part of the brain, when you experience trauma, when that part of the brain is being developed, hardwired.
How do you cope with and deal with all that as an adult now? I mean, how have you navigated that entire experience and landed where you are now?
So I think there's a bunch of things, but one of the biggest things that helped was going to school. I really didn't have the vocabulary to articulate my experience prior to that. We weren't taught it. We were taught whitewashed history. We were taught for the demographics of the school. I didn't. I don't remember learning anyone that looked anything like me at all. I also dropped out when I was 16 because it's just I didn't do. I was just struggling. Why did I drop out? I really struggled in school. I think probably some of it is trauma. I just struggled, and I felt like I stuck out, and I couldn't pay attention, and I learned differently on top of that. And then I ended up getting pregnant. That gave me the initiative to go back to school. Had I not gotten pregnant, I probably wouldn't have gone back to school. So getting through high school, going to college. Actually, I got divorced first, and then that prompted me to go to college. And it was one semester at a time. I really have a hard time looking. Like, if I looked back and I was like, this is going to take 6 years, I don't know if I would have done it. But I did. I got my associates in human services, and I got my bachelor's in social work, and then I was able to get my master's in social work. This is someone, like, I did not do well. So, but the subject matter is something that had never been presented to me before, and it was something that I identified with, and something that was really, I find a lot of, that I am passionate about. And it gave me the vocabulary to express what I was experiencing. But even in my master's of social work, people were not, it was a little discouraging because I did a presentation on the Asian American experience, and I used that, what kind of Asian are you? Have you seen that?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I think she was kind of mean. She could have used it as an educational experience. And I'm like, it is not my job to educate every racist person that I come across. That's exhausting.
Yep.
Other than that, that's a master's of social work. And the same group did not know that Columbus had never set foot in North America, nor were they educated. Now, ironically, the people that were not from this country knew that were I think there were 3 people from different countries. I can't remember which one, but they knew. So they had a better grasp of history than all of the students that were born in the U.S. None of them had ever heard like the true story of Columbus. This is a master's of social work.
That's common. In general, Americans lack of knowledge of their own history. It's quite frankly appalling, and it's not just their knowledge, because yes, what little bit of history they do know is very whitewashed, right? But it's also that they don't even know that much of the whitewashed history. It's amazing. It's just one of those things that I'm constantly just flabbergasted by. But you said you got a master's in social work and your bachelor's in social work. The field of social work in general depends a lot on having a certain amount of empathy and being able to empathize with others, right? And especially the people that you're working with. Do you think that your life experience has given you a greater ability to empathize with others?
Yeah. I think growing up, I didn't feel connected because I didn't feel seen or heard. And because of that, I felt like I was always on the outside looking in. And when you're on the outside looking at all the interactions inside, you see them differently than people that are involved in those interactions. I think that on top of, many of my experiences, I can relate to just about everyone somehow. I think we all can. But I think it's given me a better ability. And I have never had a practitioner that understood issues of adoption or racial identity, not one. And I knew as a kid, because I sought out talking to someone. I sought out talking to, actually I'm still friends with my adjustment counselor from high school. And it was nice because she would just listen. And that was the first time I ever had someone that just listened and I could just say it was just nice. Like she was warm and friendly. But no one that specialized and could help me navigate those issues. And that's why I would specifically like to be involved in that realm and working with populations that are in foster care or in adoption and dealing with issues of racial identity.
I agree. I think that the experience of being a transracial adoptee, that experience of never quite, to circle back to where we started about not being American enough, of never quite fitting in with the Americans, never quite fitting in with the Asians, never quite, and in your case, never quite fitting in with the Native Americans, and never quite fitting in. I think that for us, never quite fitting in anywhere and means that we actually straddle a whole bunch of different identities.
Yeah.
And having that ability to kind of live a little bit here, live a little bit there, live a little bit over here in all these different worlds and all these different places allows us to empathize with people who might be who might firmly live in any one of those places. We can empathize across a broader spectrum of experiences than most people can.
And it's, well, actually, I've only been to one of the groups. I'm doing an affinity group for the students with a multiracial identity. But it is something that's so common that doesn't, and it is like not fitting in anywhere. And they don't have the vocabulary. And when I said things to them, they're like, oh yeah, me too. Like I totally get that. So it is just having someone to mirror that, to have someone that understands and can relate and can give them vocabulary. Like this is what this is. It's valid. Like other people have experiences too.
You're right, because it wasn't like, because growing up I didn't have a lot of any racial mirrors really, and I certainly didn't have anybody who had been through the experience of being a transracial adoptee, because I'm just this side of ancient, I was like towards the front of the wave of international adoptions. And so there weren't exactly any adult transracial adoptees who I could look to and hear, yes, what you're experiencing, I experienced too. Yeah. And so having that sense of community and belonging, I just didn't have that at all. And so having people who could actually relate to my experience, it wasn't until as an adult that I started finding adoption groups and started this project talking to other transracial adoptees and everything that I finally started feeling like, oh, there are other people like me. I'm not alone. And after your entire life, for me, 45, 46, however many years since I was adopted, of feeling alone, right. And all of a sudden I'm not. It's actually a really cool thing. And that's why I'm having these conversations, is so that hopefully, some young transracial adoptee who's going through a really rough identity formation experience can look at you, or could look at me, or could look at any of the other transracial adoptees who made it through that mess and say, okay, I can do this too.
Yeah, I think it's really important and I appreciate all of the adult transracial adoptees that are speaking up, because I think we are speaking up a lot more. I mean, the identity formation is understanding who we are as human beings in regards to for adoptees. Like, it's the formation of our identity. Many adoptees, and especially like transracial adoptees, we don't have that foundation of knowing, a lot of us, what our birth name was,
Right.
what name we were, what our parents' names are, where we were born, what our culture is, socioeconomic status, religion. Those are core foundational aspects of most people's identity that is completely removed. And so a lot of us have to come up with something to help us understand who we are in our adoptive family, and who we are in our biological family, and who we are in the world. And that process, I feel, is a lot more complicated, and it's a difficult narrative burden. It's like, I feel like for many transracial adoptees, our identity is stretched out, like our identity formation, and it's in our 20s and early 30s that we really start to understand like who we are in this world.
Yeah. And it would be great if this conversation maybe helps some young transracial adoptee look at you and come to some of those conclusions earlier. That'd be beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we are over the 15 minutes that I had mentally time boxed us for. So, which seems to be pretty typical for our conversations, right?
Yeah, it's nice to be able to talk about stuff.
Like, it really is. It really is. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this video. I truly hope that there are bits and pieces of the conversation that you can take away and keep with you that will help with your own transracial adoption story, whether you're an adoptee, a birth parent, or an adoptive parent. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with others who you think might benefit from this conversation. Feel free to follow us on social media. There will be links at the end of the video and down below. And subscribe to our channel for more content like this, and ring the bell to receive notifications when new videos are uploaded. And if you'd like to tell your own transracial adoption story, please feel free to reach out to us on any of the platforms, the website, here on the YouTube channel, any of our social media accounts. We would love to hear from you, and we would love to help you tell your story. Thanks again, and remember, we're all stories in the end. Just make it a good one.